Have you ever witnessed someone being dragged out of a diner just because they were poor? A veteran who once saved a general's life on the battlefield, having his stew plate kicked over by a police officer in front of dozens of indifferent eyes. Have you ever heard of an old dog tag that, when activated, triggered an emergency flight corridor straight through the Pentagon at midnight? And can you imagine a young waitress with nothing but a photo and a few faded letters etched into a piece of metal, accidentally reawakening a classified national-level response protocol that had slept for 12 years? Briarfield, a quiet-looking town, where a group of officers was secretly being paid to erase homeless veterans from the streets. But then, a special ops team appeared. A key witness was abducted in the middle of the night. A high-stakes rescue unfolded in an abandoned warehouse. And finally, a gunpoint standoff on the airport runway between an old soldier and the man leading the underground police syndicate. You think this is a movie? This is the real America, where justice once fell asleep and was awakened by one man and a memory that could not be broken. Watch until the very end. Because at minute 56, a new federal law bearing the name of a forgotten soldier will change forever how this country sees its veterans. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to update our latest videos. That night, Briarfield lay beneath a silent layer of white snow, cold as a memory. Wind swept through the empty streets, whistling through the cracks of old brick buildings in a town far too used to turning its back on the forgotten. Beneath the dim yellow glow of the gas station across the road, a hunched figure moved slowly towards Station 17 Diner, a 24/7 diner for those who had no other place left. Malcolm Ward, that man, had once been a staff sergeant in the United States Army. 3 tours in the Middle East, 2 injuries, 1 near-death ambush. Every scar on his body was a memory from unnamed places, Red Desert skirmishes, and brothers in arms who never made it home. Now, Malcolm wore a battered army jacket, frayed at the shoulders but cared for like it held his soul. His combat boots had cracked soles. His hands shook from the cold but still clutched a small backpack. Inside, a thin blanket, a can of beans, and a leather-wrapped wooden box he never let out of reach. Station 17 Diner shimmered like a light at the end of a tunnel. Through the fogged-up glass, he saw a few customers eating, an elderly couple, a middle-aged man glued to his phone, and 2 plainclothes officers sitting in the far corner booth. The smell of grilled meat, fried potatoes, and brewed coffee pierced through his coat and made his stomach clench from hunger. Malcolm stood outside for a moment. Snow gathered on his cap, his shoulders, even his eyebrows. He inhaled deeply. There was something deeply familiar about this room. The crackle of an old ceiling speaker, the kitchen bell, the smell of grease and over-toasted bread. It took him back to another snowy night, far away, in a military outpost in Kunar, Afghanistan. There, once upon a time, he'd saved a man's life. A high-ranking general bleeding out in a Taliban siege. And from that night forward, Malcolm carried a secret only a handful in the government ever knew, an emergency identification code, a kind of security backdoor issued only in the most extreme cases, granted to him after an act of sacrifice most would never hear of. He pushed the door open. A soft bell jingled overhead. The room paused for half a second. A few glances shot his way, some curious, others contemptuous. He didn't react, didn't lower his eyes, didn't justify his presence. He simply walked to the stool at the bar, the one by the window and close to the kitchen, where he could scan everything. Old habits. The stool gave a tired creak as he sat. Warmth from the diner began to seep into his coat, but the eyes around him stayed cold. A young waitress, maybe in her 20s, petite but sharp-eyed, walked over. Her name was Sophie Ramirez. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, then set a menu in front of him. "Hi, sir. We've got hot stew and fresh black coffee tonight. What can I get you?" Her voice was clear and calm, no pity, no prejudice. Malcolm looked at her and gave a small nod. "Black coffee. And stew, if there's any left." "There's always some left for the ones who need it most," Sophie replied, turning back toward the kitchen, leaving him alone with his memories and the first warmth he'd felt in days. Tonight was supposed to be like every other night, a warm meal, a quiet corner, then back under the bridge to sleep. But Malcolm didn't know that tonight in this little roadside diner he would accidentally trigger a chain of events that could bring down an entire shadow network of power. And it would all begin with an old dog tag, long buried in the past. The soft clink of a spoon against a glass, the hiss of the coffee machine behind the counter. The warm air of Station 17 diner seemed to settle for a moment. But the second Malcolm Ward sat down, his presence rippled through the room like a quiet disturbance in the snowy night. In the far corner of the diner, with a full view of the bar and the front door, two plainclothes police officers sipped coffee and munched on breakfast sandwiches. Brent Callahan, broad, bald, with a voice like steel on stone, scanned Malcolm from head to toe and smirked. Beside him, Greg Fulton, wiry and sharp-eyed, chuckled under his breath at something he mumbled. They didn't need to speak loudly. The derision in their gaze was more than enough to declare, "You don't belong here." Callahan jerked his chin toward Malcolm and said, just loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "What's this? Briarfield turned into a winter shelter for jobless vets? Smells just like the guys camped out behind the train station." A few diners turned away. An elderly couple fell silent. A businessman shut his laptop. No one spoke up. No one stood. Behind the counter, Sophie Ramirez, mid-pour, heard every word. Her hand trembled slightly, but she kept her professional smile. She placed a cup in front of Malcolm and spoke gently. "Black coffee. Stew'll be out in a few minutes, sir." Malcolm nodded without looking up. His eyes remained fixed on the steaming mug before him, as if deciphering an old intelligence report, scanning the kind of classified briefings that had once saved lives. From across the room, Callahan barked again, louder this time. "Hey, Greg, count the spoons and forks after he leaves, will ya? Let's not lose anything." Fulton burst out laughing. "Better lock the restroom, too. These guys love shooting up in there." Sophie bit her lip. Her hands clenched the tray until her knuckles turned white. She glanced at Malcolm. He was still silent. But the jawline tightened. The weathered hand curled beneath the counter. Not from fear, from restraint. No one knew who he was. No one knew that tonight he carried something that could change everything. Fulton stood and swaggered over to the bar. He leaned in close, grabbed a packet of sugar, and tossed it onto Malcolm's empty plate. "Want something sweet, old man? Or need me to spoon-feed it to you?" Malcolm slowly picked up the sugar packet. He didn't open it, didn't crush it. Just set it back down on the counter. Then, in a voice low and firm, he spoke. "I was a staff sergeant in Kunar, Afghanistan. 3 combat deployments, 2 bullets, 1 silver star, and no, I don't need anything from you, except your silence. The air thickened. The diner held its breath. Callahan shoved back his chair and strode over. Listen here, old man. We keep order in this town. There's no room for troublemakers. Walk out before I arrest you for public disturbance. Sophie stepped between them, trying to ease the tension. Officers, please. He's just sitting here, quietly having coffee. He's broken no law. Fulton sneered at her. Not your concern. Step aside. Malcolm set the cup down, slowly, deliberately, a movement shaped by years of commanding through chaos, unshaken, unflinching. You have the right to arrest me, but if you do, you'll awaken something that should have stayed buried. Callahan laughed. What is this, a threat? You gonna summon a miracle? Or maybe you've got the president's number in your pocket? Malcolm said nothing. He simply looked at Sophie and nodded. Just once. A silent signal, a message spoken without words. No one in that diner knew it yet, but that glance had just triggered a chain reaction, one that would blow the doors off a hidden system of power and reveal the truth behind those who thought they had the right to decide who deserved peace and who didn't. Malcolm Ward didn't take his eyes off the coffee cup. The rich aroma curled toward his nose, but he could taste nothing. In his mind, old memories surged, flames roaring in a base under rocket fire, the frantic shouting of comrades over radios, blood, sand, and commands echoing through shattered earpieces. He had survived 3 wars. But the cold and silent humiliation at home, that at times felt harder to endure. Behind him, Fulton leaned in and blew a mocking breath against the back of his neck. A vet, huh? Think that gets you special privileges. You guys come back from war and just cling to the past, blaming the world for how you failed. Callahan jumped in, louder this time, loud enough for the entire diner to hear. Think a few medals mean people respect you. Around here, we're the law. You? Just a walking pile of garbage. From the kitchen, Sophie emerged, hands steady despite her flushed face, carrying a steaming plate of stew. She placed it gently before Malcolm, trying to offer a comforting smile. Stew, bread and green beans, she said softly. Careful, it's hot. Thank you, Malcolm replied. His voice was low but warm. Just as he reached for his spoon, Callahan flicked his hand. A sugar packet flew from his fingers and landed squarely in Malcolm's plate, splashing gravy across the edge of the table. Earning pity with your war stories now, old man. Shed a few tears, maybe they'll toss you a biscuit. Sophie froze, ready to speak, but Malcolm raised a hand to stop her. With composure, he picked up the sugar packet between 2 fingers and set it back on the counter, directly in front of Fulton. I'm not asking for pity. I fought. I buried brothers in the sand. I'm still standing, not because of luck, but because I learned how to survive, even in hell. Fulton tilted his head. Touching. But you're a guest in a decent diner. And if you don't leave now, we'll have every reason to escort you out in cuffs. Malcolm looked up. His eyes, once tired, now held the quiet defiance that had made younger soldiers fall in line. I paid for my meal. I have the right to finish it in peace. Peace, Callahan scoffed. Peace is something you don't deserve. He slammed a palm against the table, hard enough to knock Malcolm's coffee sideways. In a flash, Malcolm's hand shot out, catching the cup before the spill could reach Sophie. Silence fell over the diner. Malcolm set the cup down and calmly wiped his hand with a napkin. But his eyes, sharp, cold, and silent like a sniper waiting for the trigger, were no longer those of a frail old man. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch. He just stared at Callahan and Fulton, unmoved. And it was his silence that made both men instinctively take a step back. Fulton exhaled, trying to reclaim control. "We're calling backup. You're being detained for obstructing law enforcement." Sophie stepped in, no longer hiding her anger. "He hasn't done anything wrong. You're humiliating a man who just wants to eat his dinner." Callahan growled, "You want to get involved, Ramirez?" Sophie held her ground, her voice unwavering. "If doing what's right means standing beside someone being shamed, then yes, I want to get involved." Malcolm slowly stood. From under his collar, he pulled out a silver chain, a worn old dog tag, its engraving dulled by time. He removed it, then placed it into Sophie's palm. "If I don't come back," he whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "read the numbers etched underneath. You'll know who to find." Sophie looked at him confused. "What is this?" Just then, Fulton barked, "That's enough. Call it in. I want to know if this old man's got a record." Callahan stepped back and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, I need a background check on an individual causing a disturbance at Station 17. Malcolm raised his eyes to meet his. "I haven't caused a disturbance. I'm having dinner." "Yeah? Well, you're about to get charged with resisting a peace officer if you don't shut your mouth," Fulton snapped, but didn't advance. The diner held its breath. No one dared speak. Callahan clicked off his radio after a few seconds. "No record. Homeless, loiters near the train yard." Fulton clenched his jaw. "That's enough for us. Let's take him in, get a better look. We need to clean up the streets before some city reporters start sniffing around." They didn't cuff him, but the way they flanked him, their stance, their posture, made it clear. The decision was made. They were taking him. Outside, snow kept falling. Malcolm looked through the fogged-up window, then turned to Sophie. "Don't forget," he whispered, "they don't fear shouting. They fear the truth." They led him out, not in cuffs, but like a threat too dangerous to leave alone. Only Sophie, clutching the dog tag tightly in her apron pocket, knew what had truly just begun. After Malcolm was escorted out of the diner, Station 17 fell into silence. The remaining patrons glanced around uncomfortably. No one spoke, no one stood. Only Sophie remained still behind the counter, her hand gripping the freezing cold dog tag in her apron pocket until her fingers went numb. She looked around. No one was paying attention. Everything seemed to return to normal, except for the way her heart was pounding out of rhythm. Sophie stepped into the employee break room and shut the door behind her. She pulled out the small metal tag. Under the dim light, she could make out the faded inscription, blurred by time. CS Copy Edit. Ward 03 Theta. Clearance Code NXB-7745-Delta. At first, she assumed it was a standard military ID, but something about it felt off. As the daughter of a man who once worked inside the Pentagon, Sophie had seen military tags before, but never in this format. She pulled out her phone and tried to look up the code. Nothing came up. Still unsure what to do, Sophie thought of the only person she could trust. Her younger brother, Ethan Brooks, a senior cadet at the Briarfield Police Academy. She texted him, "Are you on shift? A cop just arrested a homeless vet at my diner. He gave me this weird dog tag. Looks encrypted. Serious stuff. Know anywhere I can check this?" A minute later, Ethan called, "Sophie, be careful. Send me a photo of that tag, right now." She snapped a picture and sent it. Less than 30 seconds passed before Ethan called again, his voice suddenly lower, more serious. "Sophie, what the hell are you holding?" That code's not normal. That's a strategic response clearance. It only activates in case of federal-level emergencies. I saw it once in a high-security drill. It's reserved for scenarios like assassination attempts or abductions of classified veterans. "Who is he?" Sophie asked quietly. "I don't know. But he knows exactly who he is." Sophie looked down at the tag again. One edge was slightly bent, perhaps from some impact long ago, but the numbers were intact. Ethan continued, "I can't touch the official system, it'll raise flags. But there's another way. An unofficial way." "What is it?" she asked. "Read the code to me. I'll contact one of Dad's old friends. He's a senior advisor now at the DC Veterans Office. He owes Dad a major favor." Sophie hesitated, then nodded almost instinctively. "Ward 03, Theta, clearance NXB7745, Delta." Ethan scribbled it down. "Go home, stay there. If this guy is who I think he is, Briarfield won't stay quiet much longer." The call ended. Sophie stood still for a long while. In her hand was a piece of metal that looked meaningless to most. What she didn't know was that deep beneath the Pentagon, in a classified bunker sealed from daylight, a signal had just activated for the first time in 12 years. Malcolm Ward, a name thought buried in forgotten files, had just awakened a sleeping giant. Level B4, the Pentagon, 2:41 a.m., Washington, D.C. In a windowless room, lit only by the glow of control monitors and thin LED strips lining the walls, a red alert suddenly flashed across the central command panel. A cold, blinking message appeared on screen. "Clearance code NXB-7745-Delta, reactivated." The on-duty officer, Captain Marcus Hill, furrowed his brow, lowered his coffee, and instinctively began scanning through the console. "Strategic Surveillance Center, this is Hill. We have a live code reactivation, WARD-03-THETA. Origin, Briarfield, Pennsylvania." Another voice called from the adjacent room. "Wasn't that one decommissioned? Didn't it expire as part of the obsolete Tactical Response Registry?" "Incorrect," Marcus snapped. "That code was never deactivated. It's part of a classified national-level Veteran Protection Directive, authorized directly by Army Command after Kandahar 2012. Within 40 seconds, a classified alert was dispatched to General Nathaniel Briggs, retired commander, now a senior strategic advisor to the Department of Defense. Briggs, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, sharply dressed, was seated alone in a glass-paneled office overlooking the Potomac. He had been drafting a congressional address on veteran healthcare reform when his private satellite line lit up. "Briggs." "General, we have a live activation, code WARD-03-THETA, originating from Briarfield. Identity markers match archival records from 2012. Every word struck Briggs like a jolt. He stood up, eyes sharpened behind his reading glasses. "Who triggered it?" "A civilian. Name pinged on the initial trace, Sophie Ramirez." Briggs turned to the frost-lined window. "I want Malcolm Ward's current location. Deploy a special operations unit within 30 minutes. And notify the Department of Justice and the Veterans Affairs Office. We may be facing an internal threat." "Understood, General." Briggs ended the call. He walked over to a steel drawer, unlocking a file marked Operation Kandahar, Unit 47, Echo Squad. The first page held a weathered photograph, a black man with a full beard, worn-out body armor, cradling Briggs, then a colonel. Through smoke and rubble, during the infamous Taliban ambush. Malcolm Ward. Briggs murmured, "You saved my life then. Now it's my turn." That very night, an elite team from the Department of Defense, bearing the insignia Strategic Response Unit, was dispatched to Briarfield. A priority flight corridor was opened. Unmarked armored vehicles rolled out of Fort Meade at 3:12 a.m. Priority 1 protocol was granted. Target for extraction and protection. Malcolm Ward, former Staff Sergeant, Echo Unit, status critical. In less than 45 minutes from a single worn dog tag, the machinery of American defense had begun to move. Not for a general, not for a terrorist threat, but for a wandering man, once a hero, now humiliated on the very soil he once swore to protect. Briarfield Police Headquarters, 4:06 a.m. Malcolm Ward was escorted into a small holding cell with low ceilings and stained walls. A flickering fluorescent bulb overhead buzzed intermittently, as if weary of the souls passing through. Callahan pushed the door open, issuing a curt command, "In." There was no physical abuse, no overt aggression. Yet the silent disdain, the cold indifference, and the underlying contempt were more brutal than any blow. Malcolm sat on the metal chair, hands resting on his thighs. He spoke not a word, neither bowed his head nor pleaded. His gaze remained steady, the gaze of a man who had stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale. Callahan poured himself a cup of coffee, but offered none to Malcolm. He and Fulton sat in the adjacent room, sipping their drinks and chatting as if on a casual break. "Call in some backup," Fulton sneered. "Wouldn't want the press accusing us of roughing up a vet. Need witnesses for the fun." "I've sent his info up to the feds," Callahan smirked. "If this old man has any record, even a torn train ticket, I'll keep him long enough to clean up the neighborhood." Elsewhere in the city, Sophie hadn't returned home. She stood by the second-floor window of her modest apartment, clutching her phone, eyes fixed on the screen. The last message from Ethan contained just 3 words. "In progress." She had no idea what was unfolding, but deep down, from Malcolm's words, from the way he entrusted her with the dog tag, Sophie knew remaining silent would mean abandoning a man who once saved the nation. 5:02 a.m., Federal Highway en route to Briarfield. 4 unmarked black SUVs sped down the highway at nearly 120 kilometers per hour. On their windshields, a subtle insignia read, Unit 47, Strategic Response. Inside the lead vehicle sat Agent Helen Royce, a former field commander of overseas tactical units. She reviewed old files, including an image of Malcolm carrying General Briggs out of a blaze. The screen's glow reflecting off her stoic face. "What are the orders?" one agent inquired. "Extract Malcolm Ward from any form of custody, at all costs, no local interference. His identity remains classified." 5:26 a.m., rear of Briarfield Police Station. A low-pitched siren sounded. Only the night shift officer took notice. 3 minutes later, the internal alarm rang. The duty officer stared at the monitor, stunned. "Federal Security Alert, Transfer Order. Code, Ward 03 Theta. Recipient, Malcolm Ward. Reason, Strategic Level Combatant, Emergency Status. Digital Signature, General Nathaniel Briggs, DoD Special Authority." 5:33 a.m., Police Station. A female officer knocked on the holding cell door. "Personnel from the Department of Defense are here. Federal order, he's to be released immediately." Callahan was taken aback. "What? It's only been a few hours. How the hell did the feds—" The back door swung open. Agent Helen entered, presenting her badge. No explanations, no pleasantries. She stated firmly, "Under Strategic Response Protocol 31A, Section 4, we have full authority over Malcolm Ward. Failure to comply within 60 seconds will result in this facility being sealed." Callahan and Fulton were speechless. Before they could react, Malcolm stepped out, casting a quiet glance at the two officers who had mocked him mere hours earlier. No resentment, no anger, just the silence of a man who had braved battlefields and now returned from humiliation in his own homeland. The armored vehicle door closed behind him. The convoy departed Briarfield, leaving behind two bewildered officers and a town on the brink of confronting the storm they had inadvertently unleashed. 6:18 a.m., eastern suburbs of Briarfield. A modest two-story wooden house sat atop a small hill, known in classified files as Wind Station. Once a strategic communication point in the post-Iraq War era, it now served as a temporary safe house for individuals designated as special security risk. Malcolm Ward sat in an armchair facing the window. In front of him, a pot of hot tea, a clean wool scarf, and a thick open dossier. Yet he hadn't touched any of it. He simply sat there, silent as a monument made of flesh and bone, letting his breath mingle with the cold morning mist. The door creaked open. General Nathaniel Briggs stepped inside. No bodyguards, no ceremony. Just one man who owed his life, and one man who had saved it, meeting again after nearly 13 years of silence. Malcolm looked up. Briggs stood tall, but his voice softened. "I should have found you sooner. I should never have allowed you to live like this." Malcolm shook his head. "You had your battlefield. I had mine. But now, we're standing together on a new front." Briggs took a seat. For the first time in years, his eyes no longer bore the weight of a general, but that of a man who had just realized the country he served had abandoned the men who once protected it. "I've reviewed every old file, about Echo Squad, about Kandahar, about Isaiah Knox." Malcolm's hand tightened slightly at the name of his fallen comrade. Briggs continued, "And I've seen the list of veterans who've disappeared over the last 5 years, men from special units, homeless, unsearched for, and all of them surfaced in areas under Iron Core Solutions' urban projects." Malcolm nodded. "That's no coincidence. They're cleansing the cities, sweeping away anything that doesn't generate profit, including the very people who once held this country upright." Briggs stood and walked to the window. "I've contacted the Department of Justice. Several senators are awaiting formal documentation to initiate hearings. But I need proof. I need testimony, and there's only one man I trust to lead that charge. You." Malcolm was silent for a moment, then locked eyes with Briggs. "I'm not doing this for headlines, not for legacy. I'm doing it for those buried without names in the heart of America. For men like Isaiah." Briggs nodded slowly. "Then I'll give you everything: resources, a team, a network, and someone to walk this legal path beside you. Camille Renault." At that name, Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "The human rights lawyer, the one who beat the mining conglomerate in Arizona." "That's her." Malcolm exhaled deeply. The breath no longer carried the cold. "Good, because this time, I'm not just after vindication. I'm bringing the whole system into the light." Briggs extended a hand. Malcolm rose and took it. Two hands once dirtied by battlefield dust, now gripped firmly, ready for a new war. 11:26 a.m. Temporary office of Camille Renault. Second floor of an old red brick building near Briarfield's central square. The window was cracked open, letting in gusts of wind that scattered piles of documents printed on recycled paper. But Camille didn't care. Her eyes were locked on the computer screen, where lines of data streamed faster than most could follow. Camille, with her tight-curled hair pulled back and eyes as cold as steel, wasn't the kind of lawyer who liked cameras. She had forced 3 CEOs to resign with nothing more than a memo, and had won more cases against corporate giants than the local judge could process. But this time, she knew she was staring down something even more dangerous. A shadow system backed by both political power and corporate wealth. Beside her sat Devon Linwood, a former Spec Ops agent and tech specialist, the only one capable of decrypting the military-grade codes used by the Sentinel Order for internal communications. He was extracting data from a covert USB drive containing mirrored records of internal payments between Iron Core Solutions and a series of so-called security socialization funds across Pennsylvania. Camille furrowed her brow as a payment log flashed across the screen. Q4 clearance payout, sanitation of 8th Avenue. Priority, veteran heavy zone. They're calling human beings waste to be cleared, she muttered, her voice cold with disgust. Devon responded, fingers still dancing over the keyboard. They never expected anyone to look. Everything's disguised under programs like neighborhood protection and urban reshaping. But dig deeper, and you'll find the money flows through shell funds, used to influence local police departments, especially units with Sentinel Order members. Camille turned back to the table. Spread across it were paper files on more than 34 veterans once residing around Briarfield. Most missing, the rest officially listed as dead from accidents, exhaustion, or suicide. She picked up another report. Malcolm Ward, arrested, then released with no formal record. No fingerprint scan, no release paperwork, no mugshot. As if none of it ever happened. Devon looked at Camille, his voice low. They're erasing the past so no one remembers who ever lived here. But Malcolm, he's the last one standing. And now he wants to fight back. Camille picked up her phone and placed a call. Ava, send me all civil filings tied to Iron Core since 2017. Include state-level hearings. I don't want summaries, I want the originals. And Ava, encrypt the transfer. I don't want this system alerting anyone. She hung up, turned to Devon. I'm taking this to court, but I'll need more than that. Devon nodded. Then I'll call the old crew, Echo teams still alive, scattered across the country, but they owe Malcolm more than just gratitude. Camille stepped to the whiteboard and wrote in bold, Sentinel Order, Police Military Corporate Network. We're not just taking down a few racist cops, Devon. We're going after a machine that devours people, and it won't stay silent when we drag it into the light. Devon looked at her. For the first time, he smiled. Then we'll make it scream before it dies. In the corner of the room, an old TV crackled with a local news broadcast. The screen showed a black man with a silver beard walking out of a police station, flanked by 2 federal agents. Malcolm Ward was back, and this time he wasn't alone. 11:42 p.m. A roadside motel on the western outskirts of Briarfield, where neon signs blink with missing letters and the night clerk sleeps behind the front desk. Inside room 207, the dim light of a desk lamp filtered through a tattered cloth shade. A city map was spread out across the table, marked with red dots, black rings, and encrypted military notations. Malcolm Ward stood by the window, dressed in a lightweight tactical vest, eyes gazing toward the rows of abandoned industrial buildings, where he knew the Sentinel Order's covert base was hidden. Behind him, the members of Echo Team were appearing one by one, reunited for the first time in over a decade. Though their hair was grayer and their eyes more weathered, the steel within them had never dulled. Devon Linwood, former Special Forces, now a tech specialist, connected a decryption module to a mobile antenna set up by the window. Earpiece in, his fingers tapped rapidly on an old military keyboard. Marcus Ghost Chan, a hacker once wanted by 3 governments, now hiding under the guise of an Uber driver. He leaned in the corner, laptop on his knees, gaze like ice. "I've planted a surveillance eye inside Briarfield PD's network. They're holding a special meeting tonight. I'll stream it live." Sergeant Dana Torres, former military police, close-cropped hair, vigilant eyes. She laid out a photo on the table. A commanding officer speaking at a memorial, the Sentinel Order emblem looming in the background. "This guy's Captain Brick. He served in Fallujah, now runs Sentinel's entire deployment division. If we want to crack the system, we expose him first." Julian Pike, cybersecurity expert, silent and precise. He projected a digital map showing communications traffic from Briarfield to neighboring towns. Several channels were tagged with Iron Core Solutions logo, encrypted at military grade. They're not just operating here. At least 17 hot zones like this exist along the East Coast. But Briarfield is the keystone. If we hit it, the rest will fall. Malcolm nodded. He placed a calloused hand on an old photo. Isaiah Knox, his fallen comrade in Kandahar. His eyes dimmed for a breath, then hardened. Isaiah once said, "If we're too afraid to dirty our hands for justice, we don't deserve to keep them clean while watching injustice happen." The room fell silent. It wasn't just a quote, it was a vow. Ghost looked up. "I just intercepted an internal PD message. There's a closed-door meeting at 1 a.m. Topic: residential restructuring on 9th Street. Priority code: maximum sanitation." Torres frowned. "That's where nearly 200 veterans live off local aid programs. What kind of sanitation are they planning?" Devon answered, tone cold. "Same as they did in the last 3 districts. Cut power, cite safety concerns, deploy police, use rubber bullets or gas if needed. Then blame it on community unrest." Malcolm clenched his fists. He looked around the room. "We have less than 2 hours. They don't just want to silence me, they want to erase the very memory of those who once held this nation together." Julian added, "We need proof. An audio recording, a confirmed image. Something that can't be deleted." Malcolm nodded. "Then we're sending someone into the hive, and I know who can do it." All eyes turned to him. Ethan Brooks, Sophie's younger brother, a police cadet, the only person we can trust inside. A beat of silence. Torres was the first to nod. "The kid's got guts, but if he fails, we need a plan B." Malcolm stood, pulling on his jacket and taking the map. "Plan B is to expose everything before another veteran disappears into their storm of silence." A distant train horn echoed through the night. Briarfield lay still, but inside room 207, war had already begun. 12:57 a.m., 3rd floor conference room, Briarfield Police Station. The low hum of the air conditioning couldn't drown out the tension creeping through the walls. A group of senior officers gathered behind drawn blinds. Phones had been confiscated before entry. At the far end of the room, Ethan Brooks, Sophie's younger brother, sat quietly in plain clothes, a small backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside it, a covert recording device set up by Echo Team. As a final-year cadet at the police academy, Ethan had been invited to observe under the guise of tactical training. No one questioned him. Ethan was always quiet, always in the background, never opinionated. Tonight he sat among the very men who'd ordered Malcolm Ward's arrest. At the head of the table stood Captain Brick, silver hair slicked back, voice sharp as a blade. We're about to make real progress in Phase 3 of the Briarfield Redevelopment Initiative. Iron Core has approved an additional $2.5 million to clean out Zone 9. Rapid Response will join us tomorrow night. And let's make sure it's not another Edgemont, no media sniffing around. Another officer scoffed. And that old vet, Ward, just someone we forgot to background check. If it weren't for those two clowns, Callahan and Fulton, making a scene, he'd probably have died of pneumonia under a bridge. Captain Brick glanced at a color-printed report. His military tag triggered a code. National-level clearance. There may already be surveillance in place, but trust me, they won't react in time. We just need to erase everything before sunrise. Ethan kept his head down, sweat pooling at the base of his neck. He caught every word, every name, every deployment order. The device in his jacket pocket recorded it all, transmitting live to Echo Team's encrypted servers in a motel on the outskirts of town. Across Briarfield, Malcolm and Devon listened in through secure headsets. Devon whispered, "Jesus, he's actually saying it out loud." Malcolm closed his eyes, then opened them, his voice steel. "We have the tape, but truth has never come cheap." 1:36 a.m. Ethan slipped out of the meeting room just as quietly as he'd entered. But before he could reach the end of the hallway, a hand suddenly grabbed his wrist, yanking him into a shadowed corner. Brent Callahan, face flushed from liquor, eyes narrowed. "Haven't seen you around the dorms, kid. What are you doing here this late?" Ethan stayed calm. "Assigned to observe." Callahan smirked, voice low and dangerous. "Careful, kid. Some places are for those who know when to shut up. Remember that." Ethan nodded, pulled his wrist free and kept walking. But Callahan watched him for a long time after, like a stray dog catching the scent of blood. 8:13 a.m. A text hit Ethan's phone. "Report to disciplinary office immediately." He walked into the academy conference room. The dean and an internal affairs officer were waiting. No explanations, just a security cam still of Ethan leaving a restricted zone the previous night. Due to internal security concerns and unauthorized access to confidential material, Cadet Ethan Brooks is hereby suspended pending further investigation. Ethan didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He simply walked out of the academy gates, backpack zipped tight, carrying with him the recording that captured the confession of an entire corrupt machine. That evening, Sophie was wiping down tables at Station 17 Diner when an envelope slid under the door. She picked it up. Inside, Ethan's police cadet ID, cut clean in half, and a single note. "I did the right thing, but now they know. Be ready." Her hands trembled, but her eyes no longer afraid. Echo Team was preparing to release the recording, but the Sentinel Order now knew it was being hunted. And the war, from this point forward, would not remain in the shadows. It was about to erupt in broad daylight. 11:02 p.m. at an abandoned warehouse on the west side of Briarfield, nestled beside the old industrial district. Once a shipyard, now a haven for those wanting to hide people and sins. Sophie Ramirez was tied to a rusted iron chair, her eyes blindfolded with the black cloth, collar torn wide open. She had been kidnapped right after her night shift at Station 17 diner, the stale scent of cold coffee still on her breath. She hadn't even had time to call Ethan. In the darkness, a familiar male voice echoed, low, mocking. "Who do you think you are, Ramirez? Just a diner waitress trying to play hero." Brent Callahan. He circled her like a predator, flashlight aimed directly at her face. Greg Fulton leaned against the wall, smoking, waiting as if this were just another boring punishment ritual. Callahan continued, "That card, that damn code, where did you get it? Who told you to send it? Or who's behind you?" Sophie didn't respond. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, but her eyes, visible through the frayed cloth, still burned. No fear, only fury. Fulton stepped forward. "We don't need you alive to get answers. We just need you gone. An accident, a fire, or maybe a body floating down the river." Callahan raised his hand to strike. At that exact moment, 3 blocks away from the warehouse, Echo Team was in position. Malcolm Ward wore his old tactical gear. A reconditioned light armor vest, battlefield boots, and an armband bearing the Echo emblem. A black circle with a white lightning bolt slashing through. He checked his non-lethal stun gun and turned to his team. Devon Linwood, thermal scanners active, 3 heat signatures, 2 mobile, 1 stationary, that's Sophie. Sergeant Dana Torres double-checked her rappel ropes, nodding. "We've got 5 minutes. After that, city patrols will sweep through." Julian Pike was jamming the local security cameras, rerouting all feeds to a temporary storage server at a motel nearby. Marcus Ghost Chan typed rapidly, disabling the motion alarms throughout the industrial zone. Malcolm spoke quietly, his voice firm as steel. "We're not here to kill. We're here to get our own back and drag the bastards in the shadows into the light." 11:17 p.m. Infiltration begins. The side door to the warehouse is unlocked using a magnetic pass. No sound, no light. Dana went in first, moving like a phantom. Malcolm and Devon followed close behind. 11:19 p.m. From the second floor of the warehouse, Callahan suddenly paused mid-interrogation. He sensed something was wrong. "Is the back door locked?" he asked. No one replied. A soft click echoed behind him. When Callahan turned, Malcolm Ward was standing in the doorway, stun gun raised, his eyes blazing with the fury of an Afghan sandstorm. "Let her go, now!" Callahan screamed, "You!" He reached for his pistol, but before he could aim, a burst from Devon's stun gun hit him square in the chest. He convulsed and collapsed. Fulton tried to flee, but Dana intercepted, expertly locking his neck in a swift tactical hold. Julian rushed in to untie Sophie. She coughed hard, eyes red, but managed a faint smirk. "Took you long enough. I almost missed my morning shift." Malcolm gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're here now, and this time, no one gets left behind." 11:25 p.m. Echo Team extracted safely, carrying with them Sophie alive with no major injuries, a covert audio device hidden on her person, recording every threat made by Callahan and Fulton. A video clip from Ghost's hidden cam, Callahan admitting that the order to arrest Malcolm came from higher up, to suppress homeless veterans who might disrupt urban investment order. By morning, the clip was delivered into the hands of Camille Renaud, civil rights attorney. She immediately drafted a lawsuit against the Briarfield Police Department, and submitted the accompanying evidence to the Pennsylvania State Judicial Committee, 7:45 a.m., one day after the rescue. Sunlight pierced through the thick grey clouds over Briarfield, casting its light on the rooftop of Station 17 Diner, the place where it all began. Inside her small apartment, Sophie Ramirez sat in front of her computer, eyes fixed on a freshly edited video clip. On the screen, the footage was grainy, but the voice was crystal clear. It was Brent Callahan. That old man Ward's a high-ranking vet, isn't he? Guys like that are just dead weight now. The fewer of them around, the easier it is to clear out those zones for investment. The words hit like a bomb. Sophie hit upload. In the description, she wrote, "They thought he was invisible, but he once saved a general's life. He fought for this country. And this country forgot him. This is the truth. This is Malcolm Ward. Stand with Malcolm." Within 15 minutes, the video had 20,000 views. By noon, it had hit 1 million. The hashtag number sign Stand with Malcolm surged into the top 3 national trends on X, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Veterans across the country began sharing their own stories of injustice, abandonment, and being treated like burdens. At the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs, Camille Renaud and General Nathaniel Briggs held an emergency press conference. "We confirm Mr. Malcolm Ward is a former staff sergeant who served in Kunar, Afghanistan. He saved my life and the lives of many others. The way he was treated, like a criminal in his own country, is unacceptable." Camille held up the video Sophie had recorded and played it before a sea of cameras. "We have gathered evidence of a coordinated effort between Sentinel Order, a covert policing network, and Iron Core Solutions to systematically remove veterans and the homeless in favor of real estate interests. At the same time, Iron Core Solutions held an emergency board meeting. Board members were on edge. Stock prices had dropped 13% in just 4 hours. Journalists swarmed the company's headquarters in New York. Several internal documents were leaked online, including an email titled Urban Cleanup Protocol. Back in Briarfield, a wave of fury was rising. Over 300 people gathered outside the police station, demanding the immediate suspension of Callahan and Fulton, and a full internal investigation into the entire department. Veteran groups poured in from neighboring states, holding up photos of Malcolm Ward and banners reading, "We are not invisible. We were the shield of this nation." The Briarfield City Council convened an emergency hearing under immense pressure from the public and the media. In a high-rise office, Captain Brick, the man behind Sentinel Order, watched the chaos unfold on a massive screen. His eyes were bloodshot from sleeplessness. "All this for one old man and a damn coffee girl," he muttered. A subordinate asked cautiously, "Should we pull out of Briarfield?" Brick replied, voice ice-cold, "Number pulling out is admitting guilt, but we're done waiting. Move up the timeline." He slapped a thick dossier on the table. Phase 4, Clearance Night. That evening, Sophie left her apartment to attend a community press briefing, only to find her car had been vandalized. She received an anonymous message, "You saved him once. Next time, no one will save you." She inhaled deeply, her fingers brushing against the dog tag Malcolm had given her, now worn around her neck like a protective talisman. At a covert location on the outskirts of the city, Echo Team assembled once more. Malcolm stood before them, his voice steady and resolute. "They're setting up for their final move, but this time, we strike first." Ghost nodded, pointing to a monitor. "Brick's signal shows he's prepping a private jet to leave Briarfield." Our chance to end this, for good, is coming. Malcolm turned to Sophie, now fully part of the team. You ready? Sophie nodded without hesitation. I'm not backing down. You pulled me out of fear. Now I'll help you shatter the darkness. The storm was no longer coming. It was already here. And at the center of it, it wasn't a politician. It wasn't a general. It was a man once forgotten, now rising like a torch in the night, carrying the truth and the weight of all who had ever been called invisible. 3:27 a.m., private airport, West Briarfield. A silver Gulfstream jet was being refueled in haste. On the fog-covered tarmac, the screeching of armored vehicle tires pierced the silence. Inside the VIP cabin, Captain Brick, the head of Sentinel Order, was packing classified documents into a locked briefcase. He made a quick call. No, I'm not retreating. This is just a tactical relocation. We'll restructure from the outside. The plan doesn't stop because of one old man and some online noise. I need 2 more weeks. I'll send the new comms code soon. As he ended the call, an alert tone sounded. Sir, a guard said, we have a situation. Security system reports a breach from the southern perimeter. Brick frowned. Initiate emergency protocol. Prepare for immediate takeoff. But he didn't expect what came next. Malcolm Ward, standing in the middle of the runway. Under the cold white floodlights, he wore his old army jacket, dog tag glinting on his chest. Behind him stood Echo Team, Ghost Chan, Devon Linwood, Sergeant Dana Torres, and Julian Pike, each positioned tactically to cut off every escape route. Malcolm walked slowly to the center of the landing strip, eyes locked on the lit-up cabin ahead. A black SUV carrying Brick sped toward him, then screeched to a halt when it saw him standing there. Smoke rose from the tires into the night air. Brick stepped out, briefcase in one hand, a pistol holstered at his side. I should have known. You wouldn't go down quietly, he growled. Malcolm didn't respond. He stared directly into Brick's eyes, the eyes of a man who had once carried his comrades on his back, through war zones, now staring at a traitor on his own soil. You're running from the truth, but I'm here to see you off. Properly. Brick pulled his gun. I'm not going to prison. You don't have the authority to arrest me. Malcolm stepped forward. No fear, no weapon. Don't need authority, just the truth. And it's waiting for you, on the other side of those cuffs. Suddenly, a shot rang out from the distance. A red laser streaked past Brick's shoulder, hitting his gun and knocking it to the ground. Sniper Sergeant Dana Torres, lying prone in the old control tower, 200 meters away. Brick screamed in pain, blood running from his hand. A squad of federal agents emerged from both ends of the runway, encircling the entire area. Drop your weapon, hands in the air. Brick tried to run, but Ghost had already remotely disabled the aircraft systems. The cabin door wouldn't open, and the jet couldn't take off. Julian Pike transmitted over comms. All airport security systems are recording. Every document transfer, every movement. It's being uploaded now. Brick was subdued. His briefcase fell open, spilling its contents. Payment records of bribes to multiple Briarfield police officers. The Clearance Night Plan, a campaign for the forced eviction of the homeless from strategic districts. An encrypted USB containing 8 years of wire transfers between Sentinel Order and Iron Core Solutions. A federal agent nodded to Malcolm. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. Your part ends here. Malcolm said nothing. He walked forward, picked up the briefcase and placed it gently on the hood of the armored car, like a ritual marking the end. Behind him, the wind rose, cold and clean. Sophie, filming from a distance, had captured the entire arrest. The clip went live that very morning. In just 1 hour, 5 million views. Headlines exploded across platforms. Head of Sentinel Order arrested while attempting to flee. Police violence and conspiracy with Iron Core exposed. Veteran Malcolm Ward, the man they couldn't break. One battle had ended, but the war for justice was only beginning. 3 weeks later, at the Eastern Federal Court, a special hearing was convened, not because of legal procedure, but because public outcry had demanded justice that could no longer be delayed. Malcolm Ward, once dismissed as a disruptive, homeless old man, now sat in the front row, dressed in a crisply pressed military uniform sent directly from the Pentagon. Pinned to his left lapel, a silver star and 3 overseas service ribbons. Beside him stood Camille Renaud, the civil rights attorney specially appointed by General Briggs. Her hair tied back neatly, hands gripping a stack of files nearly the width of her forearm. Across from them, Captain Brick was escorted in, dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit, hands cuffed, face bruised from the night of his arrest. His lawyers looked pale. Iron Core Solutions' legal team sat behind him, refusing to comment to the press. The hearing began. Camille stepped to the front, placing a silver USB gently on the podium. Your Honor, over the past 7 days, we've analyzed 148 gigabytes of internal data from Sentinel Order and Iron Core Solutions. It includes 63 audio recordings from internal meetings with district police chiefs, 117 secret wire transfer receipts from Iron Core to the so-called Briarfield Order Planning Fund, 3 operational blueprints titled Night Sweep, Clearance Protocol and Silent Zoning, demonstrating a systematic plan to forcibly displace the homeless in order to manipulate downtown real estate values. And most importantly, the confession of the defendant himself, Captain Brick, recorded the night he was arrested on the tarmac. The courtroom fell silent. Camille turned the projector toward the bench. A video began playing, Malcolm Ward being dragged away from Station 17 diner, but the audio was crystal clear from a hidden mic sewn into Malcolm's shirt. It was Callahan's voice. Those ex-soldiers, orders from up top are to clear them out before fall. Fewer witnesses the better. They're trash, not veterans. In the back of the gallery, some began to cry. One man stood up, pulling from his pocket a faded photo. His older brother, a veteran who had gone missing 5 years ago and had once lived in one of the cleared zones. Camille pressed on. Your Honor, this is no longer an isolated case. This is the result of a coordinated conspiracy, nearly a decade long, exploiting those who once sacrificed for this nation for financial gain. She pulled a new document from her case, presenting it before the bench and the press. The Liberty Restoration Act, a proposed bill before the U.S. Congress, including mandatory establishment of independent oversight mechanisms in every jurisdiction to monitor coercive removals of the homeless, federal investigation into any entity involved in unlawful displacement of veterans, creation of a National Veterans Justice Fund to provide housing, therapy, and reintegration for unhoused veterans. The entire courtroom rose in applause as Camille concluded. National media dubbed the event the trial that ripped the mask off local power. Iron Core Solutions was placed under full investigation by the Department of Justice. Top executives were subpoenaed. 4 mayors and 2 police chiefs from neighboring towns were suspended pending investigation for aiding Sentinel Order. And Captain Brick, he was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison without parole for conspiracy to suppress civil rights, bribery, and organized violence. That evening, news broadcasts across the country aired the same image. Malcolm Ward walking out of the courthouse surrounded by applause from hundreds of Briarfield citizens. A reporter rushed forward. "Mr. Ward, do you have anything to say?" Malcolm looked up at the autumn sky and exhaled slowly. "I just want those who fought and those who fell to be remembered as people, not as shadows." 1 year later, spring returned to Briarfield, bringing with it a rare warmth after a political winter steeped in cold silence and legal storms. But this time, the city didn't just change seasons, it changed its consciousness. On the grounds of a once-abandoned industrial site, where Sentinel Order had once plotted to cleanse the homeless, now stood a glass-lit structure bearing a name of solemn honor: Ward Justice Center, a multifunctional community hub funded by the Department of Veterans Affairs, private foundations, and thousands of individual donors, built to honor those who had served their country, but were once forgotten by it. In the building's grand atrium hung a large portrait: Malcolm Ward, in his old military uniform, standing in the red dust fields of Kandahar, his eyes gazing toward the future. Below it, the inscription read, "He survived the wars abroad and stood silent through the war at home." At the main auditorium, hundreds gathered for the inauguration ceremony. Veterans, students, young officers, and former homeless residents of Briarfield. Sophie Ramirez, now a documentary filmmaker, stepped onto the stage, her hair now cut short, her gaze confident. In her hands was the same camera that had captured the earliest moments of the justice movement. She introduced her newly released, nationally premiered film, The Man They Couldn't Break. The film had won Best Social Documentary at the Vision Awards and was now part of the curriculum at military and law academies. Sophie shared, "I used to think I was just some no-name waitress. But if one glance, one dog tag, can reach the Pentagon, then anyone can do the right thing, as long as we dare to try." Malcolm Ward did not appear on stage. He sat quietly near the back, dressed in a grey sweater, leaning on a cane, his eyes fixed on the screen, where a previously unreleased clip played: Malcolm carrying a child out of a refugee camp in Kandahar. Beside him sat Dr. Clarissa Wynn, a former combat medic, now head of the center's PTSD therapy program. Together, they co-led a veteran advisory group, helping others gain new skills, rebuild, and rediscover their sense of purpose. That evening, Malcolm walked home from the center, making his way to a small wooden house on the edge of Briarfield, a home built for him by fellow veterans with their own hands. He sat on the porch steps, gazing up at the stars. In his hand, he held that old dog tag, once a lifeline, now a symbol of an entire movement. His phone buzzed. It was General Nathaniel Briggs. "Old friend, the center's open. What are you planning to do next?" Malcolm chuckled softly. "Keep going. Always keep going, because there are still people being forgotten." Stand with Malcolm was no longer a hashtag. It had become policy, community, and conviction, because one man who had once remained silent had chosen not to stay silent anymore. And the light after the storm did not come from the sky, it came from the unyielding resilience of souls that would not break. In a world where honor is easily forgotten and silence is often mistaken for weakness, Malcolm Ward proved one thing: resilience doesn't have to be loud. Justice doesn't always arrive with a roar. Sometimes it begins with a calm gaze and an old silver tag. He didn't fight back with fists. He didn't retaliate with hate. He stood with truth and forced an entire system of power to bow its head and face itself. From a snow-covered diner in the dead of night to the corridors of power at the Pentagon, his story reminds us, never underestimate someone simply because they are silent. Because there are those who have heard too many gunshots to need to shout for the world to listen. All they need to do is stand their ground, just like him, Malcolm Ward, the man they couldn't break. And if you're watching this video, remember, you don't need power to start change, just a conscience and the courage to act when it matters most.